I'm just trying to decide if I'm comfortable even talking about that.
This one's wife. Harry settles. Big clue given. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Prince Harry has settled a legal case against the publisher of the Sun newspaper over claims of unlawful intrusion into his life. Harry alleged that journalists and private investigators working for News Group newspapers, NGN, part of the Murdoch empire, used unlawful techniques to pry into his private life, and executives then allegedly covered it up. Prince Harry and Tom Watson, now Lord Watson, were the only two claimants going forward with the legal action against NGN. 39 cases had been settled since a hearing last July. Those cases included claims from Hugh Grant, Sienna Miller, Paul Gascoigne, Catherine Tate, and Melanie Chisholm of the Spice Girls. Harry had explained to a New York Times summit at the end of last year that one of the main reasons he was pursuing the case was because the others had to settle. In essence, he'd taken on the mantle of continuing with the case, making it clear that he didn't have to settle, that he could be the one that wanted to proceed. Indeed, he had long stated that he wanted the case to go to trial so that he could get accountability for other alleged victims of unlawful news gathering of private information by NGN journalists. When he launched his claim, Harry alleged that more than 200 articles published by NGN between 1996 and 2011 contained information gathered by illegal means. Sweeping allegations. He alleges that he was unlawfully targeted by the journalists and private investigators. He lodged civil claims against NGN at the High Court, and in March last year he sought to amend his case to add new allegations, including that the Sun ordered private investigators to target his then girlfriend and now wife, this one's wife, in 2016. But the High Court refused this, ruling that the Duke could not add new allegations relating to the years of 1994, 1995 and 2016. He was also denied permission to pursue allegations against Rupert Murdoch himself, and his argument that there had been a secret deal between NGN and senior royals. This was rejected. Accordingly, the trial was about to start, and it had been delayed, which was in order to allow settlement negotiations to take place. Now, before we get to the body of that, it's worth having a quick reminder of just how litigious the Prince of Pink Pancakes is. He's brought a case, the security case, against the Secretary of State for the Home Department. Originally, he was granted permission to seek a judicial review of the decision that was made about security arrangements. The judicial review found that the government had acted lawfully in relation to its decision over his security, so he lost. He was also denied permission to appeal, but he then filed a direct appeal, and a partial appeal had been granted by the Court of Appeal, that appeal going to be heard in April of this year. So there were various aspects to the security case, which is still ongoing. He brought a case against MGN, Mirror Group newspapers, which was essentially similar to the one that he brought against the Sun. He accused MGN journalists and private investigators of phone hacking on an industrial scale and obtaining private details by deception. And he said, along with other claimants, that senior editors and executives knew and approved of such behaviour. He won that case in December 2023 and settled the balance of it in 2024, which resulted in him having his costs paid and receiving damages, I think, of around £300,000. So that was case number 2. He's brought a claim against Associated Newspapers Limited, the publishers of the Daily Mail. He's brought that with Elton John, Sadie Frost and Liz Hurley. That's going to trial in 2026. He brought a libel claim also against Associated Newspapers Limited. He began that in 2021, but he dropped the case in 2024. He brought another claim against ANL, alleging libel concerning his supposed snubbing of the Royal Marines. That was launched in 2020, and ANL apologised and paid damages. This one's wife has also brought legal action, as you know, in the past. And there was the claim that has just been settled against news group newspapers. So Harry has had, or is ongoing, 6 legal cases, excluding the ones brought by his wife. These cases are substantial, going up against corporate, well-resourced defendants, and the legal costs on either side runs to tens of millions of pounds. Now, in some of the cases, there are other claimants, and therefore the cost is spread. But as people have settled their claims, Harry has continued, and as mentioned, he wanted to get accountability. Now, as I understand it, it was likely that his claim would succeed against NGN, and it actually revolved around the question of how much he would receive by way of damages. I understand that what's known as a Part 20 claim, what used to be called a payment into court, was made by the defendant, which essentially stated, we think you're going to win, and therefore, in order to protect ourselves and to try and force you into settlement, we think that you'll recover this amount. And so we're offering you this amount and payment of 60 to 70% of your costs up to the time that you settle and accept this offer. The advantage of accepting that offer means that the case ends, that the claimant gets most of their costs covered, and they will receive an amount. Now, where that becomes a problem, for instance, is, let us say, your opponent offers you £100,000 by way of damages, but you've already spent £1 million on legal costs, and you want to win, let's say, a further £1 million by way of damages. The offer of £100,000 is a lot smaller than what you're seeking, and furthermore, if you'd stop the claim at that juncture when your costs are £1 million, the opposition would generally be ordered to pay £700,000 as a rule of thumb, so you would end up with £800,000, so you're £200,000 out of pocket. The risk, however, is that if you don't accept that offer and you go to trial, and trials are very expensive because they're particularly labour intensive, the risk factor is that if you go to trial and recover less than £100,000 that have been offered, the following happens. You end up with whatever the amount the court orders, so you win and you get £90,000. You also then have to bear your costs thereafter, which will include the trial costs, which will be substantial, and you have to pay your opponent's costs from the latest date you could have accepted their offer. So, for example, let us then say that you bring a claim for £1 million and an offer of £100,000 is made to you with payment of your legal costs. You reject that and you go to trial. Your costs overall are £5 million. Let's say your opponents are also £5 million. You win, and the court orders that you receive £90,000. You failed to beat the Part 20 offer. Accordingly, what you are then left with is receiving £90,000 for your damages, a £5 million bill for your costs, and let us say the opposition costs ran from the date of when the offer might have been accepted at £3 million. So you're on the hook for £8 million less than £90,000, which, as you can imagine, would prove particularly devastating for many people unless they're a billionaire. As I understand it, this is the situation that Harry has faced, that there is a risk that if he was to proceed to trial, and although he would win, he might not recover as much as had been offered to him, with the consequence that he would be significantly on the hook for costs. Now, given that that is what has been driving the pressure on him, hitherto it didn't seem to be affecting him. Remember, he said to the Times News Summit, the book summit rather, those are the people who had to settle. I don't need to. I'm carrying on behalf of them. I'm going to take it all the way to trial because I want accountability. Thus, that's clearly a man who is either stupid and hot-headed and still wants to go on despite the risks, or is relaxed about the risks because even if he were to lose, he can absorb the hit in whatever the financial outcome is if he fails to beat the payment offer. But he's got his day in court, and he's got certain findings, and he's got the certain allegations proven, so he can point to all of that to say, I was right, and so what, it's cost me several £1,000,000, I don't care, I wanted to get to the truth. There are some instances where people would do that they're sufficiently well-resourced that they don't care how much it's going to cost. They want their day in court. They want to prove their case. For most people, the financial considerations overtake and subsume any considerations of justice and getting to the truth. Money is very important. Accordingly, with Harry, given that he was so adamant about him proceeding because other people had to settle and that he wanted to get accountability, one would think that he would go to trial and see what would come out of it. But on the very day that he was meant to start, settlement negotiations had taken place and a settlement has reached. Given the fact that NGN have always looked to settle this case, recognising that they were likely to lose, it's just a question of how much. Why is it that Harry has suddenly decided he's going to settle? Well, it might be that he's woken up to the fact that he's been advised, look, some of the things you think are going to be proven aren't going to be proven, so you can forget about that. That's a possibility. But I think what's focused his mind to a greater deal is money. The fact is, he's clearly now appreciated the risk that if he was to proceed, that he might fail to beat the Part 20 offer, with the consequence that he would be on the hook for millions, if not tens of millions of legal costs. Bear in mind, this litigious individual has already racked up significant legal bills with other cases already. And even where you win, there's always an element of irrecoverable cost, which means that any damages you obtain tend to be eroded by that. I shouldn't imagine that Harry is becoming wealthy from legal cases. Given that he's had substantial legal spend with the other cases already, and the risk that he could be on the hook for substantial costs in the case against the son, I am of the view that him now settling this is as a consequence of financial pressure. Now, it might be that he's just decided, I need to protect my finances generally. After all, I don't really want to spunk 5, 10, 15, 20 million pounds. That causes a problem for me. The idea of losing that amount of money of itself may well prove to be problematic for him. But it may also be indicative of the fact that the Sussexes' income does appear to have dried up as of late. We've seen that the various attempts to start new lines, new income streams has failed, and that those attempts have been roundly ridiculed, that few people are looking to partner with them. It might also be a consideration with regard to the oft-vaunted potential divorce proceedings, and could it be that he's got one eye on that and therefore doesn't want to exhaust his monies in the meantime? But the big clue that comes out of this settlement, given that he was so adamant that he wanted to get accountability and that he was going to forge ahead on behalf of these other claimants who had to settle and he didn't, clearly tells me that he is worried about the financial ramifications, that he has been exposed to significant costs already, which he's been able to absorb, but it could well be that the risk of this case against the son, with a lengthy trial and all the costs associated with that, expensive solicitors, expensive barristers, everything associated with that, would prove too much on what are now creaking and strained finances. I think that the fact that he has settled indicates that the Sussexes have financial concerns, and it appears to me that that's only likely to be exacerbated and Harry has sought to ameliorate some of that difficulty by bringing this case to a conclusion through settlement. He gets the apology, of course, from NGN. Then he also will receive payment of costs, no doubt. They'll have hammered out a deal and he'll have got some damages. It might not be sufficient to cover everything that he spent so far, but ultimately he wanted to finally avoid the risk of being on the hook for substantial costs. What do you think? Do you agree with me that the finances of the Sussexes are being particularly tested, and this trial would have added to it substantially, and therefore they have sought to protect their position, particularly that of Harry? Or do you think something else has brought about this settlement? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.